He's a member of Metropolitan Division, the cream of the crop as far as LAPD is concerned, and everybody aspires to be Metro. Those in Metro say either you're Metro or you're not. Ask anyone in Metro, they'll tell you that. Please, if you'd be so kind, put your hands together for Rudy DeLeon's son, Rudy DeLeon Jr.
Thank you all very much. You know, Dad once said that the greatest thing that ever happened to him was becoming a Los Angeles police officer. So one of us 4 kids say, "Hey, Dad, what about the birth of your 4 children?" He says, "Trust me, you're on the list." But I tell you, on behalf of our entire family and all of Dad's friends, lifelong friends, you know, we are just like, we are totally overwhelmed by this whole event and this honor that you bestowed on Dad. And if there was possibly words I could express to thank so many people that made this happen, I sure would say them today. But believe me, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank each and every one of you. Dad used to tell us a lot of stories about his life. And these stories were usually about events that pointed him in the right direction, or made him the man that he was, or maybe they were just funny. And he would relay these things to us. He told us how when he was a teenager, he stuttered when he talked, and he lacked a lot of self-confidence. And when he was 16 years old, there was a place in Burbank called Jeffrey's Barn. Jeffrey's Barn was a small auditorium that held boxing matches and offered and encouraged amateurs to participate. Dad, with some encouragement from pals Frank Miranda and Artie Villasenor, signed up to go there and participate. Now, he mistakenly thought that his ability to defend himself might apply to boxing, and he would when he would tell us the story, he says, I can remember seeing my opponent in the locker room before the fight. He said, this guy had muscles on muscles. He even had muscles in his face. And he says, I got a little concerned. And he said, I went out there, and he says, as you walk down to the line, former heavyweight champion of the world, Jim Jeffries, would stand by the ring, and he would repeat, who's going to be the next champ? Who's going to be the next champ? And he says, I never forgot that. And he says, I got in the ring, and he says, I went after that guy. He says, I chased him all over that ring. He says, I was throwing punches wildly. He says, I don't think I landed any. And he says, by the second round, he says, I was out of gas. And he said, that guy knocked me down so many times that Artie, Frank, and myself could not remember how many. He said, but I did finish the fight. And he says, and when I was leaving the ring, I looked over at Jim Jeffries, and I thought to myself, I certainly could tell you who's not going to be the next champion. But, like he always did, he said there were certain things that he certainly learned from that. And he says, if I could put myself out there, if I could get up in the ring, get pounded into the canvas in front of all those people and survive, he says, there was probably no limits to what I can do. And he says, and secondly, I made it my goal never to always be prepared for anything that I do. And he says, in preparation, I didn't prepare and I failed. But he said there was a third benefit, and that was that the boxers that participated, they would loan him trunks. And his trunks had the name Colima on it. And he says when the fight started, the crowd was chanting, give it to him, Colima, give it to him, Colima. And he said, boy, did Colima let him down. And he says, but my apologies to all the Colimas in the world, he says, but at least I didn't disgrace her family name. You know, Dad grew up during the Great Depression. And the closest thing that he knew to a summer vacation was when the job market got bad here in Los Angeles. The whole family would move up to Santa Paula in Ventura County, where they worked on the Teague Lemon Ranch, picking mostly nuts and all working together. And Dad would always say, and Pop was his dad, was the hardest working guy there. But when he was about 12 or 13 years old, he got a rare opportunity. He had a good friend by the name of Mike Baca. Mike had lost his dad and was being raised by his mother. Mrs. Baca found out that there was a summer camp being sponsored by the Los Angeles Police Department for fatherless boys. Mike didn't want to go alone, so somehow Mrs. Baca convinced my grandmother to let Rudy go, posing as Mike's brother. So Rudy and Mike Baca went off to summer camp. Dad said the food was absolutely terrible. He says he didn't think it was humanly possible to make mashed potatoes taste as bad as they had at that camp. And he said, and shortly a whole lot of the boys got sick. And he said, but one of the officers stood up in front of him and with totally humorous intent said, the reason all you Mexican boys are getting sick is your stomachs are just not used to fine American food. He said the boys and the officers all laughed together at that. He says, as the week went on, the food got better, and he and Mike had a great time. He said these officers took him hiking, they taught him how to swim, they taught him how to dive, they set up a ring there, they taught him how to wrestle, they had wrestling matches, and he says these guys were great guys. He said they were role models, and he said up until that time of his life, although he was taught respect for police, he never really had a feeling that to look at police as friends. And he said that summer camp there forever changed that view. And years later, when he was captain here at Hollenbeck, any program that could duplicate that same situation there, Dad was all for it. You know, on an added note, some 15 years later after that summer camp, Dad became a juvenile officer. And who is he assigned to work with but that same police officer from that camp 15 years ago, now very senior. And you know, when you get a couple of partners together working for the first time together, you might talk about different things, but pretty high up on this list is, hey partner, where are we going to eat today? And as Dad got into the car with him, he looked over at his partner and he says, hey, do you know anywhere where we could get some fine American food? And he said they laughed and they went off together. Dad always thought that the greatest thing in life was when you found somebody, and it didn't matter what walk of life it was, that had a job that they loved, that they dedicated themselves to, that was a job that was meant for them. Dad worked full-time in a variety of jobs until he was 78 years old. But by far, hands down, the job that he was meant for, the job that he loved the most was being captain here at Hollenbeck. But you know, if he was here today, we'd have one dissenter in the crowd, because he said he would quickly point out that it wouldn't be his name that should go up there. It'd be those hundreds of officer civilian workers that did such an outstanding job the whole time he worked Hollenbeck. It'd be the city councilman who would come around and ask how the city could help out to make things work around here. It'd be the businessmen, the civic leaders that he would meet with often, that would always wanted to reinvest in their community and make this a better place. But finally, it would be the people that live in Hollenbeck. And he said there were so many of them, so willing all the time to work hand in hand with the police and everybody else to make this a better, safer place. Dad, when you parted from Dad, he'd give you a quick little line of advice. He'd say, be cool, be sharp, study hard, work hard. And that was his advice. And but if you ever asked him what he would attribute his success for, he never would say, oh, it's because I studied hard, I worked hard. He'd quickly tell you, no, it was because I had so many friends along the way, he said, that would turn me around, point me in the right direction, that would encourage me to do better. He says school teachers, and he could name every one from first grade on up, he said, that inspired him and led him to believe that he could do better and that he could do good things anyway. His two brothers, Jesse and Manuel, his two sisters, Lily and Gloria, who he loved so much and loved him and would always help him out whenever they could and whenever he needed it. His wife Helen, our mom, his wife of 59 years, who certainly stood by him through a lot of ups and downs and had her share of sacrifices. But by far, hands down, the two people that Dad would thank and he praised constantly were his mother and father, Mom and Pop. He said Mom and Pop immigrated to our city and raised their 5 kids during the roughest of times and the toughest of times. And they did everything they could, made every sacrifice they could so that their 5 kids could be successful and get an education. And they were so successful on all counts. You know, like I mentioned earlier, Dad grew up during the Great Depression. And he would tell stories about going with Uncle Benny to Hoovertown to bring home half-rotten vegetables, or to go to Culver City with Uncle Reuben and pick lima beans that used to grow there. And he said, you know, he says, I never once in my life ever thought that we were poor. He said, we always had food on the table, maybe not much. He said, but most of all, we had Mom and Pop who were always there to take care of us. So on behalf of Mom and Pop and the entire family and all Dad's friends, we really want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for this honor. Thank you very much.